The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, tucked inside the day's mail like it had every right to be there. A folded flyer with rustic lettering, ink smudged slightly at the edges, and a sketch of a cowboy boot kicking up dust. Community barn dance, Friday night. Everyone welcome. I laughed under my breath when I first saw it. Everyone welcome? They didn't mean me. I wasn't born here, didn't grow up on a ranch, didn't spend my childhood summers mucking stalls or learning two-step under these string lights I'd only heard about. This was the kind of small-town event where everyone knew everyone, where roots tangled deep in the soil and strangers like me stuck out like weeds. So I tossed the flyer on the counter with the rest of the junk mail, fully intending to forget about it. But when my boyfriend, Mark, came in from his shift and spotted it, his eyes lit up. "You should go," he said, already towing off his boots by the door. I blinked at him. "We should go, you mean?" Mark gave one of his easy grins, the kind that used to melt me. Lately, though, I couldn't help noticing how it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sure, but you especially. You've been holed up for weeks. Might do you good to loosen up." The comment stung, though I tried not to let it show. Loosen up, as if I'd been a drag on his fun. Still, I swallowed it down and nodded, pretending to agree. By Friday evening, my reluctance hadn't faded. As I buttoned up a plaid shirt, borrowed from Mark's closet because I owned nothing remotely country, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My collar sat awkwardly against my neck, my jeans too new, too stiff. I looked like what I was, an imposter dressing up for a play he wasn't cast in. "You'll be fine," Mark said, slipping past me to adjust his own shirt, the fabric clinging to muscles he knew how to show off. He barely glanced at me before fixing his hair in the mirror. "It's just a barn dance. Music, drinks, a little fun. Don't overthink it." That was Mark in a nutshell. Don't overthink. Don't ask questions. Don't notice when his attention drifted to other people at the bar, the gym, the grocery store. I told myself I was imagining it, paranoia whispering in my ear. Tonight, maybe I'd prove myself wrong. The barn was already alive when we pulled up, lanterns strung in zigzags overhead, glowing like captive fireflies. Cars and trucks lined the dirt road, dust swirling up under tires. Fiddles and banjos spilled through the open doors, a rollicking tune punctuated by bursts of laughter. Inside, the heat hit me first, not just from bodies packed together but from the sheer energy. Boots stomped in rhythm, skirts twirled. The wooden floor creaked under the weight of decades of dances just like this one. The scent of hay mingled with cologne and the sweet tang of spiked cider. I lingered by the doorway, trying not to look lost, while Mark slipped easily into the crowd. He was in his element here, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, drawing people into his orbit like a practiced politician. He didn't bother introducing me, not that anyone seemed to notice I was there. For a while, I nursed a drink and let the music wash over me, pretending the smile on my face was real. Couples spun past, their laughter bright and unguarded. Friends clapped in rhythm, boots scraping in syncopated beats. It was beautiful in a way, raw and communal, like stepping into another century. But it was also a reminder of everything I wasn't. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw him, Mark, not dancing with me, not even looking for me, but leaning too close to someone else. A man with broad shoulders, flashing a grin that made Mark laugh, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in weeks. Their heads bent together, conversation hidden in the swell of music. My chest tightened. For a moment I thought maybe I was misreading it, that they were just friends catching up, sharing a harmless joke. But then I saw Mark's hand brush against the man's arm, linger just a fraction too long, fingers curling like they wanted to stay. The drink in my hand suddenly tasted bitter. I set it down on a hay bale and turned away, heart hammering. The fiddles played on, the dancers laughed louder, but all I could hear was the echo of my own thoughts. You don't belong here. You don't belong with him. I shoved my hands into my pockets and stepped back toward the open doors, craving air. Somewhere behind me, Mark's laughter rose again, careless and bright, and for the first time I didn't want to follow it. I lingered by the barn doors, half in and half out, like I couldn't decide whether to escape or endure. The night air carried a chill, soft against my skin, but it wasn't enough to calm the knot twisting in my chest. I didn't want to go back in. Not with Mark's laughter ringing in my ears from somewhere deeper inside. Still, walking away felt cowardly, like admitting something I wasn't ready to face. That's when I felt it, the weight of someone's eyes. Across the barn, leaning against a wooden post as if the whole place belonged to him, stood a cowboy. And not the polished, dressed-up-for-town type I'd seen at gas stations or feed stores. He looked lived in. Sun-touched skin, a shadow of stubble, broad shoulders filling out a plain flannel shirt worn soft with age. A hat tipped low but not enough to hide his gaze. Steady, unreadable, fixed on me. I froze, caught in the intensity of it. At first, I told myself he was just idly scanning the crowd. But then he didn't look away. A flicker of recognition sparked inside me, though we'd never met. He was studying me like I was the only one standing still in a world spinning with music and laughter. Heat rose to my cheeks. I shifted my weight, tried to act casual like I hadn't noticed. But his gaze followed, calm and patient, almost daring me to hold it. And against every instinct screaming to look away, I did. It was a mistake. Or maybe it was the first honest thing I'd done in months. His eyes, gray, stormy, softened at the edges, didn't flinch or waver. They didn't mock me, didn't pity me. They simply saw me. And for someone who'd been invisible all night, it felt like a jolt straight through my chest. Before I could overthink it, he pushed off the post and crossed the space between us. Slow, unhurried, boots tapping the wooden floor like he had all the time in the world. My breath hitched. I wanted to step back outside, disappear into the dark. Instead, I stood rooted, heart thudding. "Don't look like you're enjoying yourself much," he said, voice low, rough-edged but warm. There was no judgment in it, just observation. I swallowed. That obvious? His lips curved in a hint of a smile. Only to someone paying attention. The music swelled behind us. Fiddles fast, feet stomping. But here, in this sliver of quiet near the door, it was just his voice and the steady way he held himself, like the floor couldn't shake beneath him if it tried. "I'm fine," I said quickly, defensive before I realized it. "Fine," he echoed, tilting his head. That's the word people use when they're about to walk out and never look back. I froze, caught in the intensity of it. At first, I told myself he was just idly scanning the crowd. But then he didn't look away. A flicker of recognition sparked inside me, though we'd never met. He was studying me like I was the only one standing still in a world spinning with music and laughter. Heat rose to my cheeks. I shifted my weight, tried to act casual like I hadn't noticed. But his gaze followed, calm and patient, almost daring me to hold it. And against every instinct screaming to look away, I did. It was a mistake. Or maybe it was the first honest thing I'd done in months. His eyes, gray, stormy, softened at the edges, didn't flinch or waver. They didn't mock me, didn't pity me. They simply saw me. And for someone who'd been invisible all night, it felt like a jolt straight through my chest. Before I could overthink it, he pushed off the post and crossed the space between us. Slow, unhurried, boots tapping the wooden floor like he had all the time in the world. My breath hitched. I wanted to step back outside, disappear into the dark. Instead, I stood rooted, heart thudding. "Don't look like you're enjoying yourself much," he said, voice low, rough-edged but warm. There was no judgment in it, just observation. I swallowed. That obvious? His lips curved in a hint of a smile. Only to someone paying attention. The music swelled behind us. Fiddles fast, feet stomping. But here, in this sliver of quiet near the door, it was just his voice and the steady way he held himself, like the floor couldn't shake beneath him if it tried. "I'm fine," I said quickly, defensive before I realized it. "Fine," he echoed, tilting his head. That's the word people use when they're about to walk out and never look back. Something about the way he said it made me glance at him fully, forgetting for a moment to guard myself. I caught the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, evidence of years in the sun, of squinting into horizons. He wasn't young, but that only made him seem steadier, anchored. I realized then how desperately I wanted someone steady. I tore my gaze away. And what if I was about to leave? Then I'd say you're wasting a perfectly good night, he replied. His tone was easy, teasing, but not pushy. Music's good. Drinks are cheap. Air smells like hay instead of smoke. Better than most places I've seen. I huffed a laugh, despite myself. You make a strong case. There it is, he said softly, almost to himself. A laugh suits you better than that look you had a minute ago. The words landed too close to the truth. My chest tightened, caught between gratitude and guilt. I shouldn't be talking to him. I had a boyfriend inside, even if that boyfriend's hand was lingering on someone else's arm. That didn't matter. Loyalty mattered. I stepped back, creating space, clinging to that thin rope of resolve. I should probably find him. The cowboy studied me, not moving closer, not trying to stop me, just watching. If you were mine, he said finally, voice quiet but certain, I wouldn't leave you standing by a door, wondering if you belonged. The words hit me harder than they should have. A spark lit in my chest, dangerous and undeniable. My throat went dry, my thoughts scrambled. But I forced a small, strained smile. Good thing I'm not yours then. Good thing, he echoed, though something in his eyes said otherwise. I turned before I could fall further into that gaze, slipping back into the press of the crowd, the fiddle music, the sweat and laughter. My heart was still pounding, my skin still buzzing. I told myself I was doing the right thing, pulling away before I crossed a line. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the truth. A stranger had seen me more clearly in 5 minutes than Mark had in months. And the worst part? I wanted to be seen by him again. The barn was too hot, too loud, too much. The fiddle scraped at my nerves. Laughter rang hollow in my ears, and the floor vibrated under the weight of boots stomping in unison. I pressed through the crowd until I found the door again, slipping outside like a man gasping for breath. The night air was cool relief. The sky stretched wide and endless, stars scattered across it like a promise of silence I desperately needed. I leaned against the fence, hands braced against the worn wood, and sucked in air thick with grass and dust. For a moment, I thought I'd found solitude. But then Mark appeared behind me, swagger in his step, the same grin plastered on his face as if it had been carved there. There you are, he said, voice half distracted. Thought you ditched me. I forced a small smile. Just needed some air. He didn't notice the tightness in my voice, or maybe he chose not to. He stepped beside me, but his eyes were already flicking back toward the barn, toward the lights and the laughter that had nothing to do with me. You should come dance, he said lightly, brushing imaginary dust from his shirt. People are starting to loosen up. It's fun in there. I searched his face, looking for some trace of the boy who used to make me feel like the only person in the room. All I found was impatience. I'm not really in the mood, I admitted. Suit yourself. He shrugged, and before I could stop him, another figure emerged from the barn doors. A tall man with broad shoulders and a smug kind of ease. Mark's expression shifted instantly, brightening as he greeted him. Hey, you made it. The stranger grinned back, and without hesitation, Mark clapped him on the shoulder. The two slipped back into the barn together, laughter trailing behind them, leaving me alone on the fence line. The ache in my chest deepened, sharp and bitter. I wasn't stupid. I knew what I'd seen. The whispers, the glances, the touches that lingered a second too long. I'd been brushing them aside, telling myself I was imagining it. But denial only lasted so long before it turned into self-betrayal. For the first time, I let the thought surface fully. Maybe Mark wasn't mine anymore. Maybe he hadn't been for a while. I gripped the fence tighter, wood biting into my palms. I wanted to storm back in, confront him in front of everyone, demand answers he'd never give. I wanted to walk away entirely, drive home, slam the door behind me, and never look back. But I didn't move. I just stood there, pinned in place by uncertainty and fear of what came after the truth. You look like you don't belong in there. The voice was quiet, familiar, and it made me turn. There he was again, the cowboy, The one whose eyes had held me earlier, whose presence felt like a steadying hand even when he hadn't touched me. He leaned against the barn wall now, one boot crossed over the other, arms folded loosely, like he'd been waiting for the right moment to step in. I let out a humorless laugh. Is it that obvious? He tipped his hat back just enough to reveal the curve of a smile. Only to someone who knows what it feels like. I looked at him then, really looked. His face carried the kind of quiet strength you didn't find in someone untouched by hurt. There were stories in the way he held himself, scars I couldn't see but sensed all the same. And somehow that made me trust him more than I should have. Still, I shook my head. You don't have to worry about me. I'm fine. Fine, he repeated, like he didn't believe a word of it. He pushed off the wall, took a few unhurried steps closer, and leaned against the fence beside me. He didn't crowd me, didn't press. He just stood near enough that I could feel his presence, steady and unassuming. You're with him? He asked after a moment, nodding subtly toward the barn. I hesitated before answering, guilt prickling under my skin. Yeah, I'm taken. The words felt brittle, fragile, like glass that might shatter if I pressed too hard. He nodded slowly, eyes thoughtful. Then that's all I need to know. I expected disappointment, maybe even some attempt to persuade me otherwise. But he surprised me. He didn't push. He didn't lean closer or flirt or try to turn my denial into an opening. He simply accepted it, even if his eyes said he'd seen the cracks I couldn't hide. You deserve someone who keeps you from standing out here alone, he said gently. Then he tipped his hat in a small gesture of respect. But that's not my business unless you want it to be. And with that, he stepped back, giving me space again, leaving the decision in my hands. I stared at him, torn in 1,000 directions. My loyalty screamed at me to turn away, to shut this down before it became something more. But a smaller, quieter voice whispered something else. Something I didn't want to admit. It felt good to be noticed, to be seen. I opened my mouth to respond, to tell him something, anything, but no words came. He must have seen the conflict warring in my expression because he gave me one last, kind smile and turned toward the shadows. If you need air again, he said over his shoulder, you'll know where to find me. Then he disappeared into the night, boots crunching softly on gravel until I couldn't hear him anymore. I stood there a long time, staring into the dark, the echo of his words lingering like the warmth of a fire I hadn't realized I'd been standing too close to. Inside, the music swelled again. Mark's laughter carried over the fiddle, carefree, careless, and I realized just how invisible I had become. I told myself I wouldn't look for him again. I told myself I could make it through the night if I just kept to the edges, blended in, and pretended I didn't care. But lies have a way of unraveling the second your eyes betray you. I saw Mark the moment I stepped back into the barn. He wasn't searching for me. He wasn't even pretending. He was out in the middle of the floor, grinning like he belonged there more than anywhere, his body pressed too close to someone else's. They spun in rhythm, boots stomping, their laughter loud and easy. Mark's hand lingered on the man's waist, fingers curved with an intimacy that should have been mine. The world tilted. My stomach lurched. The music blurred, fiddles screeching into a mess of sound that no longer held rhythm. I stood frozen, every instinct torn between storming over to rip them apart and turning on my heel to disappear for good. In the end, I did neither. I just broke. I shoved through the crowd, muttered apologies falling useless from my lips, and made for the door. My vision tunneled, breath caught in my throat. The laughter, the lights, the whole night pressed down like a weight I couldn't carry anymore. But before I could step outside, a voice stopped me. Don't let them see you break. It was low, calm, and somehow steady enough to cut through my chaos. My hand froze on the barn door. I turned, and there he was, the cowboy, standing at the edge of the dance floor, half in shadow, eyes locked on mine. I should have ignored him. I should have kept walking. Instead, anger flared hot, sudden and desperate. Why do you care? I snapped, my voice sharp enough to draw a glance or two from the nearest dancers. Why do you keep following me around like you know me? He didn't flinch, didn't rise to the bait. He just tilted his head, expression unreadable. "Because you look like you're carrying too much alone," he said simply. That cracked something in me I wasn't ready to face. The fury surged higher, feeding off my shame. "You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I want. You don't know." My voice caught, broke apart. The words I wanted to hurl at him dissolved into a choked breath. My chest heaved, and suddenly I wasn't angry at him anymore. I was angry at myself, for staying, for pretending, for letting Mark make me invisible. I shoved past the cowboy, stumbling out into the cool night. The stars spun overhead, sharp and dizzying. I braced my hands against the wooden railing of the porch, trying to breathe, but the tears came anyway, hot and humiliating. Behind me, the cowboy's boots creaked on the boards. He didn't speak right away, didn't touch me, just stood close enough that I felt his presence, grounding and patient. When I finally found my voice, it came out raw. "I think he's cheating on me. Hell, I know he is, and I can't even bring myself to call it what it is." Silence stretched between us. Not judgmental, not awkward, just steady. Then, softly, "Sometimes the hardest thing isn't seeing the truth. It's admitting you deserve better than the lie." I laughed bitterly, wiping at my eyes. Deserve better? I don't even know what that looks like anymore. I've given him everything. My time, my loyalty, my trust. And all I've gotten back is scraps. And the worst part, my voice cracked again. I've convinced myself scraps were enough. The cowboy shifted, and for the first time I looked at him fully. His face was shadowed by his hat, but his eyes shone in the dim light, steady, unflinching. "I've been where you are," he said. "Giving your whole heart to someone who doesn't bother to show up. Thinking if you just hold on a little tighter, they'll finally see you. It doesn't work that way." I swallowed hard. "So what do you do? How do you stop waiting for them to change?" His jaw tightened, just slightly, like he was remembering something heavy. Then he stepped closer, not invading, but near enough that I could feel the quiet strength radiating off him. "You stop waiting. You decide your heart's worth more than being someone's backup plan." The words lodged deep inside me, like seeds waiting for light. My breath came unsteady, but lighter somehow, as if a piece of the burden had shifted. I didn't realize until then that my hands were trembling against the railing. Without a word, the cowboy reached out and covered one with his. His palm was warm, rough from work, steady against my shaking fingers. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a declaration. It was a simple squeeze, gentle but sure, as if he was saying "I've got you" without speaking at all. My throat tightened again, but this time from something softer than grief. I let my head fall forward, resting briefly against his shoulder. His shirt smelled faintly of hay and cedar, of sweat and earth, real and grounding. For the first time that night, I felt safe enough to let the tears fall without shame. He didn't move, didn't rush me. His other hand rested lightly on my back, not pushing, just steady, like the railing I'd been clinging to moments ago. Only this time it wasn't what holding me up. It was him. When I finally pulled back, embarrassed by my own collapse, he didn't let go immediately. His eyes searched mine, calm and kind. "You're not alone," he said quietly. "Even if it feels like it right now." I nodded, unable to speak. My voice had abandoned me, but something else had taken its place. A flicker of hope, fragile but alive. He released my hand slowly, as though giving me the choice to take it back or hold on longer. For a split second, I almost did hold on. Almost. But loyalty, stubborn and misplaced, made me step back. "I shouldn't," I whispered, shaking my head. "I'm still with him." The cowboy accepted it with a simple nod, no bitterness in his expression. "Then that's where you are. But if you ever decide you deserve more, you'll know where to find me." The music swelled again from inside, laughter spilling out through the barn doors. But out here, under the stars, in the quiet space between heartbreak and something unspoken, I felt a shift. For the first time, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as invisible as I thought. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, sheets twisted around my legs, the dark pressing heavy against my chest. Mark had stumbled in late, smelling of whiskey and laughter that wasn't for me. He collapsed on the far side of the bed without a word, already drifting into snores that grated against the silence. I turned toward the wall, blinking into the shadows, my mind refusing to quiet. Every time I closed my eyes, two images battled for space. Mark, laughing with someone else on the dance floor, his hand too familiar on another man's waist. And the cowboy, steady and calm, telling me I wasn't alone while his hand held mine as if it belonged there. Anger roared hot, betrayal cutting deep, but right behind it came something gentler, more dangerous. The memory of warmth. The way my shaking had stilled when he touched me. The way he hadn't pushed, hadn't demanded, just stood with me until I could breathe again. It felt wrong to think of him while my boyfriend lay inches away. And yet, it was the first time in months I'd felt truly seen. By morning, my eyes burned from lack of rest. Mark was gone when I woke, his side of the bed cold. No note, no text, nothing. Just emptiness where presence should have been. I dragged myself through the motions of the day, telling myself to let it go, to bury last night deep where it couldn't tempt me. But fate, or something like it, had other plans. I saw him again in town. The cowboy. He was leaning against the side of the feed store, arms folded, hat tilted back just enough for the morning sun to catch in his gray eyes. I almost kept walking. Almost. But something in me slowed, like a tether pulling tight, until my boots carried me toward him without asking permission. "Morning," he said, voice rough but warm, like gravel smoothed by water. "Morning," I echoed, awkward and too aware of how my chest tightened just standing near him. "Didn't think I'd see you again so soon." His lips curved in that half-smile, the kind that unsettled me more than a full grin. "Small town," I said, shrugging like it was nothing. "Bound to run into people." "Sure," he said, but there was a knowing in his tone that made me look away. We stood in silence for a moment, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable but heavy, weighted with everything unspoken. I fiddled with the cuff of my shirt, fighting the urge to confess how little sleep I'd gotten, how his words had replayed in my head until dawn. "You looked like you needed someone last night," he said finally, his voice softer now. I exhaled a shaky breath. "And you decided to be that someone?" His eyes flicked toward mine. "I've been where you are. Knew what it felt like. Didn't want to let you drown in it." That made me look at him fully. "You've been cheated on too?" He nodded once, jaw tightening. "Years ago. Gave her everything, time, trust, all the parts of me I thought mattered. She found someone else anyway. Walked out one night and never looked back." His gaze dropped briefly, then returned, steady as stone. "Took me too long to realize it wasn't my fault. That sometimes people leave because they don't know how to stay." The honesty in his voice cut through me like truth always does. I swallowed hard. "I don't even know if I'm ready to admit it out loud. But I saw him last night." "I know. You don't have to explain it to me," he said gently. And that right there was what made my chest ache. He didn't ask for details, didn't pry or demand proof. He just believed me. And in that moment, I realized how starved I was for someone to simply listen. I let out a laugh, hollow and self-mocking. "You know what the worst part is? I can't stop thinking about you instead of him." The admission slipped out before I could pull it back. My face flushed hot, and I looked away quickly, staring at the row of trucks lined up along the street like they might save me. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He just shifted slightly closer, the space between us shrinking to something electric. "Maybe that's not the worst part," he said quietly. My breath caught. I dared to glance at him again, and our eyes locked. His gaze wasn't demanding, wasn't forceful. It was patient, like he was letting me decide what came next. And that patience made it worse. Or better. Couldn't tell which. The air grew thick around us, heavy with something neither of us dared name. His hand brushed mine as he shifted. A light graze, accidental or maybe not. The touch jolted me, sent a current racing up my arm. I stepped back instinctively, shaking my head. I can't. I know, he said. He didn't move closer. He didn't chase me. He just stood there, his own breath uneven, his voice low. But don't pretend you don't feel it. The world blurred around us. Cars rolling by, people chatting on the sidewalk, the sun climbing higher in the sky. None of it mattered. It was just him and me, caught in the gravity of something neither of us had chosen but both of us felt. He leaned in, slow enough that I could stop him if I wanted to. Our faces hovered inches apart, his breath warm against my skin. My heart thundered in my chest, louder than any fiddle or dance floor. For a second, I let myself imagine it. The kiss, the release, the truth of what I wanted. My lips parted. My body leaned forward before my mind could stop it. But then the weight of loyalty, of guilt, slammed back down. I turned away sharply, breath ragged. I can't. Not yet. Silence stretched, thick and taut. I braced myself for disappointment, for anger, for the sting of rejection. Instead, his voice came soft, steady. Then not yet. I'll wait until you're ready to stop breaking yourself in half for someone who doesn't see you. I closed my eyes, fighting the war inside me. Want and guilt, hope and fear, desire and loyalty. When I opened them again, he was still there, still steady, still waiting. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just torn between two men. I was torn between who I'd been with Mark and who I might become if I let myself step into the warmth of someone who actually cared. I should have trusted my instincts weeks ago. Every time Mark came home late with some excuse about work drinks, every time he silenced his phone when I walked into the room, every time his laughter reached strangers but not me. It had been there, the truth, whispering. I just hadn't wanted to hear it. That night, though, there was no whispering. The truth shouted in my face. I had walked to the diner to grab something for myself, needing space from the suffocating tension at home. Halfway down the alley beside the building, I saw them, Mark, and the man from the barn. They were pressed together against the brick wall, half hidden by shadows, but not enough to disguise what they were doing. Mark's hand tangled in the man's shirt, pulling him close. Their mouths moved together, hungry and careless, like I had never existed. The world slowed around me. My pulse thundered in my ears, but the rest of me felt strangely numb, like my body had shut down to protect itself. My feet wouldn't move, my throat wouldn't work. I just stood there, watching the confirmation of what I'd feared unravel before me in brutal clarity. It wasn't just cheating. It was the final nail in something I'd been clinging to long after it had died. They didn't see me, or maybe they wouldn't have cared if they had. I turned before the nausea could overwhelm me, stumbling down the street with my chest hollowed out. My legs felt like they were carrying someone else's body, someone else's heartbreak. I don't know how far I walked before I stopped, but when I finally sank onto the edge of a wooden bench by the courthouse square, the weight of it hit me. I dropped my head into my hands, breath ragged, tears burning my eyes. Footsteps approached, slow and steady. For a moment I panicked, thinking it might be Mark, come to lie or smooth things over. But when I looked up, it wasn't him. It was the cowboy. He didn't speak at first. He didn't ask questions or demand explanations. He just lowered himself onto the bench beside me, the wood creaking under his weight, and sat in silence. That silence did more for me than any words could. It didn't judge. It didn't hurry. It just was. Finally, my voice cracked free, hoarse and trembling. I saw them, together, out back. The cowboy nodded slowly, his eyes steady, like he'd expected this all along but knew I had to see it for myself. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. I let out a bitter laugh, broken and sharp. You know what's messed up? I'm not even hurt because I lost him. I'm hurt because I gave him all of me when he never gave anything back. The confession tore out of me like glass from a wound. My shoulders shook, and I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to stop the flood, but it was useless. The cowboy shifted slightly, not enough to crowd me, but enough that his presence filled the empty space beside me. That's the cruelest kind of betrayal, he said quietly. When you realize you were the only one fighting for something that was already gone. I turned my head toward him, vision blurred, chest tight. His expression was calm, but his eyes held something deeper, an understanding carved from scars of his own. I should hate him, I whispered. I should walk away without looking back. But part of me still wants him to see me, to realize what he's losing. That's just your heart talking, he said gently. It takes time for the rest of you to catch up. But one day, you'll see he didn't deserve you at all. I swallowed hard, his words both comforting and painful. My hand trembled in my lap, restless and unmoored. Without hesitation, he reached out and laid his hand over mine. Not gripping, not pulling, just resting there, warm and steady. The touch anchored me. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, the storm inside me quieted, just enough for me to breathe. I let out a shaky exhale. Why do you keep showing up? He gave a faint, almost rueful smile. Because I know what it feels like to sit on a bench like this and think you'll never be enough. And because sometimes all it takes is someone sitting beside you to remind you that you are. My throat tightened, but not with grief this time. With something else. Something gentler. We sat there like that, in silence broken only by the hum of crickets and the faint murmur of traffic. His hand stayed on mine, not pushing, not demanding, just steady. I didn't pull away. For the first time since I'd seen Mark with someone else, I didn't feel invisible. Something shifted inside me then. Not a decision, not yet, but an opening. A door I hadn't realized was locked began to creak ajar. I didn't know where this would lead, or how soon I could step through it. But sitting there, with the cowboy's hand on mine and the night air cool against my skin, I realized something important. Maybe losing Mark wasn't the end of my story. Maybe it was just the beginning of a better one. We didn't plan to walk together that night. It just happened. After sitting on that courthouse bench until the crickets grew louder than the traffic, I found myself standing, and he stood with me. Neither of us spoke about where we were going. We just fell into step, side by side, letting the quiet town and the vast night sky hold what words couldn't. The stars stretched endlessly above us, bright and sharp, as if the universe wanted to remind me how small my pain really was. The cowboy glanced up once, tipped his hat back and said, "Good night for walking. Better than sitting still," I admitted, shoving my hands into my pockets. My body still hummed from the sight of Mark with someone else, but the ache was dulling, replaced by something steadier. Something that had everything to do with the man walking beside me. We reached the edge of town, where the streetlights gave way to open fields. The dirt road crunched beneath our boots. The air smelled faintly of hay and cool earth. Out here, away from the barn and the betrayal, it felt like the world had paused just long enough to give me space to breathe. He broke the silence first, his voice low but steady. "You've been carrying too much alone. I can see it." I gave a weak laugh. "You sure talk like you've got me all figured out." He shook his head. "Not figured out, just familiar. I've been where you are." I looked at him, at the steady profile outlined in moonlight, at the way his jaw tensed when he spoke. "It didn't break you?" His eyes shifted toward me, gray and stormy even in the dark. "It almost did. But then I realized being broken isn't the worst thing. Staying broken is." We walked a few more steps in silence. My chest tightened. Not with grief this time, but with something I hadn't let myself feel in months. Hope. Finally, he slowed, turning toward me on the dirt road. The starlight caught his eyes, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. "I need to say something," he murmured. My heart pounded, loud enough I was sure he could hear it. "What?" He stepped closer, close enough that I felt the warmth of him, though he didn't touch me. His voice was careful, almost reverent. "You've been through enough lies. I won't be another one. So if I'm gonna kiss you, I need to know it's what you want, not what you're running from." The words lodged deep in me, knocking loose the guilt and fear I'd been clutching. No one had ever asked me that before. Not Mark. Not anyone. It had always been about what they wanted, what I could give. But here was someone offering me a choice, offering me honesty. I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I'm ready. His eyes softened. Then we don't. Not until you are. But even as he said it, my body betrayed me. I leaned in, just slightly, drawn like gravity. My breath hitched, my pulse wild. And for the first time, the guilt didn't surge back like a tidal wave. Instead, relief trickled in, gentle, undeniable. I closed the space between us. The kiss was nothing like I'd imagined. It wasn't rushed, wasn't desperate. It was slow, deliberate, layered with hesitation and truth. His lips were warm against mine, his hand lifting to rest lightly against my jaw as though I might break if he held me too tight. And maybe I would have, if not for the way he kissed me. Not to claim, not to take, but to give. To remind me what it felt like to be wanted without condition. My chest loosened, the weight I'd carried for months slipping free with every second our lips lingered together. The guilt melted, the betrayal blurred into the background, until all that remained was the simple, overwhelming truth. This felt real. When we finally broke apart, my breath was shaky, but not from pain, from wonder. I shouldn't feel this okay? I whispered half to myself. Not this soon. He brushed his thumb gently across my cheek. Maybe it's not about soon or late. Maybe it's about right. I let out a trembling laugh, my forehead leaning against his shoulder. His arms came around me then, strong and protective, pulling me into the safest place I'd known in a long time. And in that quiet embrace, under the wide-open sky, I finally let myself be held. Not as a consolation, not as an afterthought, but as someone worth holding. Weeks passed before I finally let go. Ending things with Mark wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting match, no slammed doors. Just quiet honesty, sharper than any fight could have been. One evening, I set his key on the kitchen counter, told him I knew the truth, and that I couldn't keep pretending. He didn't deny it. He didn't even look surprised. He just nodded, muttered something about how things weren't working anyway, and walked out. That was it. Years of my life, packed up in a shrug. And strangely, it didn't crush me the way I feared it would. It hurt, yes, but it also felt like shedding a weight I'd been dragging for far too long. For the first time, I could breathe without the taste of betrayal in my throat. I spent the weeks that followed relearning myself. What I liked, what I wanted, what I needed. And no matter how much I tried to deny it, my thoughts kept circling back to the cowboy. To his steady eyes, his quiet strength, the way he asked for permission instead of taking. So when he showed up one Friday evening, leaning against his truck with that calm patience that seemed carved into him, I wasn't surprised. "Barn dance tonight," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "Thought maybe you'd want to come." I hesitated, memories of that first night flashing sharp. The sting of betrayal, the suffocating heat of invisibility. But then I looked at him, really looked, and realized this invitation wasn't about reliving the past. It was about rewriting it. "I'll go," I said. The barn looked the same as before. String lights strung in glowing zigzags overhead, fiddles singing lively tunes, the floor packed with boots stomping in rhythm. Laughter rose and fell in waves, mingling with the scent of hay and cider. But everything felt different this time. I wasn't standing by the doorway, unsure where I belonged. I wasn't searching the crowd for someone who'd already chosen someone else. Tonight, I was here because I'd been asked, wanted, chosen. The cowboy walked beside me as we stepped inside, and though no one turned to stare, I felt steadier just knowing he was there. He didn't push me into the crowd, didn't make me feel like I had to prove myself. He just let me take it all in. After a while, he turned to me, a glimmer of something playful in his eyes. "Dance with me." My throat tightened. The last time I'd stood in this barn, I'd been watching someone I loved dance with someone else, their laughter slicing me open. The memory stung, but only for a moment, because then I realized how different this was. This wasn't about being left behind. This was about being asked, chosen, seen. I nodded. "Yeah, dance with me." He led me to the floor, weaving through the crowd with an ease that calmed my nerves. The music swelled. A quick, bright tune. But when he slipped his hand into mine, the world slowed. We didn't match the frantic whirl of the other dancers. Instead, we moved at our own pace, slower, steadier. His hand rested firm at my back, guiding me, grounding me. At first I stumbled, awkward and self-conscious, but he didn't laugh. He just smiled that quiet, patient smile and said, "You're doing fine. Just follow me." And I did. Step by step, the noise around us blurred, fading into something distant. It wasn't about the music anymore. It was about the way he looked at me, as though I was the only one in the barn. About the warmth of his hand in mine, the steady beat of his body against mine. For once, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't fighting to be noticed. I was seen. As the song slowed into something softer, couples spun around us in wide circles. We stayed in the middle, our movements gentle, deliberate, like the world had shifted into our rhythm. My forehead brushed against his shoulder, and he held me closer, not possessive but protective, like he understood exactly how fragile this moment was and wanted to keep it safe. I let myself lean into him, let myself feel the weight of belonging. The barn lights glowed warm above us, the fiddles hummed sweet and low, and for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. I pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. They were steady as ever, stormy gray but softened at the edges. "I never thought I'd find this here," I admitted. His thumb brushed across the back of my hand. "Sometimes it takes being broken to see where you're meant to fit." The words struck deep, not as some empty line but as truth. The kind of truth I could build something on. I smiled, a real smile, one that didn't feel forced or hollow. "I came to the dance broken," I said softly, echoing my own memory. "But you pulled me outside to find my heart again." He held my gaze, the corner of his mouth lifting. Then he leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead. Simple, tender, grounding. The kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything but promised everything. And right there, in the middle of the barn, surrounded by music and laughter, I finally let myself believe it. Love could start over. Love could be real. And this time it was mine.